step in for the second part. How does that connect to this overall series? So those of you who have attended maybe previous lectures of this series, mainly, got to know that, of course, open science and open access has many benefits and advantages. But of course, as always, there's also some, not dark side, but there's also some dangers connected with that and problems connected with that. So if you think back in the old days before there was open access and open science movement, you had the subscription world, and you have some oligopoly of publishers. We all don't want to go back to these times, but of course you had a certain kind of quality control when it came to journals and publishers, in a way that scientists mostly or mainly read the journals that were available at their university via their libraries. And the library, of course, had to pay for subscription of these journals and publishers. And of course, they only, because it was very costly and still is very costly, they usually went to those publishers and journals that were absolutely needed and were also established a certain way. So people who also published later on in these journals, usually had the feeling, and this was also right, that this is a serious offer. These publishers are serious, and they are not dubious in any way. However, this changed for the last 10 to 15 years. So of course, open science and open access also offers the possibility for new publishers, new entrants into this publishing market. And unfortunately, not everybody is playing to the rules. And was not playing to the rules, is still not playing to the rules. And some of these publishers have some dubious or even criminal business model. So they don't do quality control. They don't do peer review. They just harvest the APCs of the researchers. And very often this leads to problems for the individual researcher, because he has published with some dubious publishing house or in some dubious journal. So his reputation is damaged. His time, energy, and money is wasted to a certain degree, because he cannot rely on this publication. And there were also, especially in the last years, I think in Germany mainly in 3 to 4 years ago, in 2018, 2019, there were some scandals where also very renowned scientists, even the president of one German University of Bremen, was caught in the act of publishing in these dubious journals. And of course, that's a problem when it comes to personal reputation, especially also for young scientists. So he's still, I think, the president of University Bremen still is in office, but especially if you are a young researcher, that's a very big problem for you if you the first years of your research career, and you cannot afford to lose a paper or to some dubious journals, because time counts, especially when you're a young researcher. So that's one thing. So for the individual researcher, that's a problem, maybe a disaster even. But also in our times, especially when I think about COVID-19, for example, or the climate crisis, you have not only in the US, but also in Europe, you have many populists, even populist politicians who try to delegitimize or destroy the legitimacy of science as a whole. And in this climate, of course, it's especially problematic if you have media news on fake science publications from anybody. So the scientific community, of course, has some strong interest to minimize this detrimental effects of predatory publishing. So I think it makes sense also for this series to talk about a bit about this not so this problematic side of open access as well. And I hope that our talk will contribute to some awareness that there are people out there and companies out there that are predatory, that are following dubious or even criminal business models. And that's what we want to talk about in the next hour or so, 45 to 60 minutes. So there will be two major aspects in this talk. First, I'll talk about these predatory publishers and especially with the focus how to recognize them. And then Zuza will take over and talks about hijacked journals, which is a rather new phenomenon, and she knows much more about that than I do. So she will give you in-depth analysis of these hijacked journals. Well, I'll start with most of these talks about predatory publishers. Maybe we'll start with a guy, a librarian, American librarian, Jeffrey Beal, who published a paper, I think exactly 10 years ago, small paper in Nature. And that was the first time when this problem of predatory publishing was more widely acknowledged and received more broad awareness, I would think. This paper is called Predatory Publishers Are Corrupting Open Access. And here he gives some experiences, personal experiences with predatory publishing at this time. Especially at this time, there was a problem that especially in India and Pakistan, but also in the US and Europe and elsewhere, predatory publishers were emerging. So the problem became worse at least 10 years ago. And he also introduced later on a list, where some blacklist, so to speak, where he listed all the publishers he thought are predatory. So got also in trouble with that. Also with his own university, who forbade at a certain point in time him to really publish this list. Come to that in a minute. Still, these blacklists are a bit problematic, but he certainly should be given the credit that he really raised the awareness of this problem. And one quote from this paper, I think, is very up to the point, especially from the perspective, for example, for me, for a librarian, that scientific literacy, he says, must also include the ability to recognize publishing fraud. So in Germany, we talk lots about information literacy, but also scientific literacy, and I think he's absolutely right, must also include being able to tell if this is a serious publisher or not. What are the main distinctive features? How can you decide personally, is this some serious offer from some respectable publisher or not? Could it be predatory? And the main distinctive feature, I guess, is that credible journals, of course, will make it hard for you to publish there. So very often you get rejected in the first place. So high rejection rates are, of course, connected to credible journals. Usually you have to do many rounds, at least one round of revision to be able to publish in some journal. And of course, there will be other scientists criticizing your research by doing peer review, serious and intensive peer review. So that's, of course, a good sign. It makes much more work for you, of course. But this is what credible journals do. They don't make it too easy for you to publish there. On the other hand, predatory journals who make a business model out of it to publish as much as possible without doing good control and good peer review, they, on the other hand, will invite you very much to publish with them. So they come to that minute how they do contact you, but they tell you I know your research. We know your research. You're doing a great job. We read your last 3 papers. Everything you write is great, and we want to have it for our own journal, and we adore your research. Please come to us. So they make it easy for you to publish there, and that's maybe the first hint that could be problematic. If you're a Nobel Prize winner already, then maybe every journal is adoring your research and welcome you to publish with them. But especially if you're a young researcher, you have to be careful, of course, if people are too open and too enthusiastic about your research right now. So usually they don't phone you that much, but usually you get emails. So there are active email campaigns, and these emails will invite you to submit your articles to their journal or invite you to conferences, invite you to submit conference papers, or even to serve on editorial boards of new journals usually, or maybe also older journals. And they don't do it in a way, in a general spam email way, but very often they really know something about you. They have, they know the titles of your last conference papers and conference talks maybe, or they write you, this and that article you published last year was great. Please write something similar for us, or something following up on that for us. So it's has been very plump in the first years, but now these phishing mails are more and more precise, and they give you the feeling they know you. And of course, if they are so positive about your research, that works sometimes. Well, here are some real-world examples from real-world librarian day-to-day work. Zuza, do you want to say something about this that was addressed to you?
Sure, these are real examples from my email box. And of course, you know, on a gloomy day, like for example, today in Warsaw, when you receive this kind of mail and you can read that someone is impressed by your outstanding research, of course, you feel amazed and much better. But, you know, and even if they invite you to China or to South Korea for a good conference, well, in theory, and even if you have money from your grant and you could afford, particularly when you need some conference to gain the credit for your research, for your studies, don't go to this conference, because probably afterwards this conference, the participation in this conference will not be valued at your institution, will not be recognized in your country, and probably also your conference paper will not be published, or will be published in a proceeding books of a very low quality. So I would say that these kinds of mails you can use really to, well, like to pamper your ego more than to try to build some international research visibility on.
Thanks a lot, Zuza. Well, so apart from this email campaigning and people adoring your research, there are other tricks you have to be careful of and you have to have in mind. So very often these predatory publishers choose naming or designation of journals that are very similar to those of renowned journals. So I told you I have some background in economics, and here is an example. You have the very important field journal of Economics and Finance. So one of the, not the absolute top, but a very important journal in its field. If you look closely, there's some Springer logo on it. So if you are more experienced, you have the hint, okay, it belongs to Springer. Maybe that's some established publisher that it should be safe. On the other hand, you have the Journal of Finance and Economics. So just finance economics just switched around. And if you look at the cover, that looks more professional. It's newer. It looks, it looks good in the first glance. So it's not always a fake fake journal that you're ready to to distinguish very, very quickly. And if you are not so familiar in this field, for example, it's very well likely that you mix these two journals up, of course. So that's another trick predatory publishers are using. And something that's also motivating people consciously or unconsciously to submit to predatory open access journals is, of course, that the APCs are often, not always, but often relatively low. So, for example, you can consider, of course, to submit a paper to Nature Communications if you have 4,000 euro available for this publication. If you don't have 4,000 euro budget for your publication, then maybe you're really looking for more affordable options. And there are lots of affordable options. For example, scholars of Middle East publishers have a broad portfolio of many, many journals that are much more cheap. And for example, yeah, the Saudi Journal of Medicine, if it's just 100 bucks, that sounds, of course, attractive, especially if you don't have that big budget for Nature Communications. So that's not always the case. As I told you, there are also predatory journals that charge the usual fee, I would say, from 8,000-9,000 euro to 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000 euro. But on the very high end, there are not too many predatory journals anymore. They are really fishing for the people who think they could save some money. That's another strategy. And because they don't do anything for you, they don't do any review for you, quality control, 50 euros is still, or 100 to $50 is still attractive for them, of course. Another thing is you could be suspicious if you never heard of a publisher, but it claims to be a leading publisher. Yeah, that's always for some, of course, it's Oxford University Press. That's a leading publisher, but probably you heard of it before many times. There are others that claim to be leading publishers, not always criminals, not always very dubious providers. There's big gray zone as well. But for example, another real-world example from Zuza, here Cambridge Scholars Publishing. Zuza, do you want to say something about this phishing mail, perhaps?
Sure, I will comment it as well. Again, the real example from my mailbox from Cambridge Scholars Publishing. But first of all, I would like to say that Cambridge Scholar Publishing is not necessarily perceived as a predator, but also there is something like a big gray zone. There are a lot of dubious publishers. So, you know, they are maybe not listed or not commanded as predators, but some of their publishing practices are not fair and are really questionable. First of all, here you see that they offered me to write the academic book in physical sciences, what is really nice from that of their part, but I am the information scientist. Then when you will see the bullet list, and they offer fast, fair, and friendly proposal review. But well, as you saw on the one of the first slides that Georg presented, really peer review is rather really a steeplechase, like this running with obstacles, than some friendly process. And of course, publication in handsome hardback and many other seducing words here. So again, and of course, they also base their name on the very good big label, which is University of Cambridge, but they are not University of Cambridge Press, they are Cambridge Scholars Publishing. So this is another hint that maybe it is good to first to check whether this publisher is really valued and recognized in our country or our institution to avoid problems in the future.
Thanks, Zuza. Right, so that's another problem. You don't have really black and white. You have a huge range of gray in between as well, and that makes it hard, especially for people who have not that much experience in publishing already. So, of course, and that's what Zuza also said right now. Another problem is, of course, or the biggest problem is with these predatory publishers, that they don't offer quality control that meets the standards of the scientific community, and often they don't have no peer review at all, or very, very low quality control. So if you are at that point and you see an offer like this, for example, again going to the Scholars Middle East publishers, where you have these very low APCs at the first hand, so author processing charges that are very low, but then you have also some fast track publication fee, so which is here at the bottom. So here you can, for $250, so if you pay 2.5 to 5 times more, then you get published within 3 days. That's really the final point where the alarm should start to ring. That's of course no offer that you can go for in any case. So being published within 3 days is some crap publication, and you cannot show that to anybody later on. So of course peer review is here the absolute gold standard in publication, and that is for the same for open access publication and also traditional publication. Never go for something with that, even though you have really high time pressure. You waste your publication completely. Well, so these are these have been hints that are mainly obvious. So if the people are too friendly to you and it's very cheap and it's very fast, of course everybody knows. Maybe everybody knows you should look for another offer. Maybe sometimes it's really hard to find information on, especially if it's a new journal. So the website is state of the art. It's very well done. There's not too much information about the publisher around because he's claiming it just started last year or something. There are editors that are not too well known, but these are real world people that actually exist. So you have sometimes really hard time to identify these guys as predators. What I sometimes do is really to look at the reported location, the addresses of the publishers, and that's something you found especially often in the beginning. You get some Google Street View of some deserted land of some grocery store, or just flat land. That can happen, for example. That's one thing. Another thing that's really real world example from my work. I had a look at this Science PG Science PG publisher, and they claimed, the other way around. They are located in downtown Manhattan, Rockefeller Plaza, #1. And of course, it's also not very, that's not very, I don't know how to say. It also looks dubious, especially if it's a very new publisher. And this really looks like the letterbox company here. Yeah, so there's just a letterbox, but surely there's nobody working for this company in this location, which is of course tremendously expensive. So that's something I also do if I don't get enough information really to make sure that this is some dubious or even predator publisher. Well, also what Zuza mentioned before, there's also not just the phenomenon of predatory publishers and predatory journals, but also predatory conferences. So some of these large predatory publishers, for example, this Omics group, which has lots and lots of predatory journals, does also organize conferences. And so they invite you to some conference in a nice location somewhere. But if you buy your ticket there and apply for this conference, then you find yourself in some community that has nothing to do with your profession and with your research. So 10 or to 20 people, unlucky people from different subjects, and there will be no feedback at all that you can make use of in this conference. So make sure if you go to a conference that you know who is actually organizing this conference. Is this some society conference from the society you know of? Is it a renowned university that is organizing this conference? Also, some hint could be email account. Is what kind of domain does this email have you are corresponding with? That could be a hint. Also, of course, same like publishing a paper, is the acceptance process well described? Is there some quality control? Are you invited 10 minutes after you send your draft, or will people actually look at the paper and stuff like that? Sometimes also these conference organizers promise you to publish your paper right after the conference, so you don't have to care about anything. You go to the conference, give your talk there, and afterwards you will have a great publication in their publishing house. Of course, that's problematic as well. So make sure you don't go there. So, for example, especially this Omics group company has some reputation of organizing lots of conferences. Actually, not one or two a year, but there are hundreds. Well, and if you have all this in mind and you're still unsure whether to submit for a journal or not, there's a nice website I can recommend. It's called thinkchecksubmit.org. And what these guys actually recommend is really to go through several steps and check if certain criteria are met or not. And if all of these criteria are met, then go for it and submit your paper. You've worked on the paper months or even years. Just take 20 minutes and check the publisher. So one of the questions is, do you or do your colleagues know the magazine or the journal or the publisher, or your supervisor if you are a PhD student, for example? Can you contact and identify the publisher easily? Do you find enough information about this publisher? It's another criterion. Is the review process clearly described? Or are the articles indexed in databases that you are using yourself, like Scopus or Web of Science or whatever bibliographic database you are using at your university? Something that could help is also, do you know the members of the editorial board? Even though, as I told you already, there are cases where people are put into the editorial boards of predatory journals and publishers without their own knowledge. So if you go for this criterion, you have to check on the personal website of the researcher if he's really listing himself or indicating himself that he works for this as a reviewer or as an editor for this journal. And if all this is not enough, there are some very, very helpful sites I really can recommend, especially the directory of open access journals here in the bottom. So they have a website and they have some whitelist where they list all publishers and journals that meet the criteria of the directory of open access organization. So there are several associations. There are also others like COPE or OASPA that consist of people who work voluntarily for these associations, and they regularly check the market and list all offers and all journals and all publishers that meet the standards that we need in science. So especially directory of open access journals, that's the first thing that I do if I have never heard of some new open access journal. If it's listed in this directory, that's good for me usually. So then I have some more checks, but if they are in, that's always a great sign. So usually that's already enough. But of course, you have to know that these kinds of websites actually exist. So have a look at this thinkchecksubmit.org website. That's usually enough. I think that's really enough to do for 90% of the cases. not all of the cases, unfortunately, and here's where I hand over to Zuza. There's another kind of predatory, not predatory, but a different kind of dubious dubious practice here.
Thank you, Georg. So now I will share my screen very quickly. So now you are more or less aware of predators. So I think you have some tips how to avoid them. And here comes a new challenge. Hijacked journal, identity fraud of scientific journals. This is quite a new phenomenon. And you will see in a moment that it looks more like a crime story. Hijacked journals, cloned journals, replica journals, these are synonymous. However, hijacked journals, I think this is the mostly known and most often used term. So what it is, hijacked journal. In fact, this is a fake website of a scholarly journal that imitates the real one. And it looks identical or almost identical. I will show you the example in a moment. It contains authentic journal data. There are just some modifications. If the journal is in a local national language, there is more content in English. Journal profile is enlarged. They have a bank account or a new bank account. And sometimes it is a new frequency and of course new email address and some modification of web domain, but web address differs only slightly. So of course, main goal, like in the case of predators, is the maximization of financial profit. However, the hijacked journals or the people who are behind, they work on a different principle, different basis. Hijack doesn't mean predatory. Predatory journals, as Georg explained, they will publish your work. So even if finally you will realize that you are in a trap of predator, but your work will be published, you will have the publication in a low reputable journal. In a case of hijacked, it is not that sure, because they can just charge you and then then cut the content, disappear. And of course, they charge also the access to journal archives. So the problem is not only for those who want to publish, but also for those of us who want to do some literature review and find the article on a fake website and cannot access the archive without paying. So how do they work? What are the characteristics of hijacked journal? First, the prestige of journal citation index. These are journals that are sometimes indexed in databases. However, they are not the best, they are not the highest. Because probably if you receive the invitation to publish from some Springer or Elsevier journal, well, you would recognize that it's not relatable. So the journals that are most endangered by being hijacked are those who are less known, but very narrowly specialized and non-English. It means that they are published they are not international, they are local, but with English content. They accept also English articles, but English is not the only language of publications. Very often they are published by small learned societies, and very often also they are in print version only or in some hybrid mode. So they are highly positioned in Google also. The problem is that these criminals, because I think we can name them like that, they also hijack Wikipedia website and often Web of Science, for example, or Scopus, by inserting links to fake journal website. So as you see, this is a really serious problem, and this is like the criminal case. So, but why it is so difficult to chase them and punish? Because first of all, these are hidden websites. Secondly, they are registered not in the country of original journal. And very often, or mostly, they are registered in the countries beyond the Western legal regulations. So not European Union, not US, Australia. That's why it is not possible. There is no possibility to chase, punish, to do anything. So in fact, the only way that the real journals may do is to warn. So for example, to put the announcement or alert on their website. But it's not enough, of course, when you will find the hijacked website as the first, and then you will stay. So here I will show you the example of Polish journal. The journal is called Sylvan. This is the journal, well, this is the oldest, in fact, this is the oldest scientific journal in the world on forestry field. And it was established in 1820, 1820. You see the journal archives from 1820 till now. So this is one website of Sylvan, English edition. And here comes the second one. So, well, I will not ask you to guess which one is hijacked, which one is not. I will just tell you. The first one is a hijacked one. So you see, much in English, I mean everything in English, but also here, this logo of credit cards and the place to pay, the place to make the order. While the second one is a print script of the original one, which only put the information in English and in Polish that they inform that sylvan-iblis.org is not any official version. And so this was just hijacked. The other thing that Sylvan editor board did was also the information in Wikipedia, yes, that there was a scam. So, but it's hard to say whether it helps or not, because I guess that no one of us visits Wikipedia to check whether there is any information about the journal scam. So this is, as I said, this is particularly popular for smaller journals. But I guess that almost all of us, particularly at the very beginning of our research career, publish in some maybe less recognized journals, just to start our publications career. That's why it is important to always check whether we are submitting our paper to a right journal, and also when you are asked to pay at the very beginning, I mean at the time, well, at the stage of submission, really it should be like the red light, because it is not the good practice and not the popular practice in scholarly publication, scholarly communication. So to summarize somehow this phenomenon of hijacked and predatory journals, why it is so important? Because the two bring risks for science, and of course, first this is some kind of endangering integrity of scholarly communication. Yes, or violating the reliability, but also this is annoying you, yes, and also your reputation at the very beginning, waste of time, waste of your time for research, waste of your money, deforming the image of science, and also you may be accused of inappropriate spending of public funds if you, for example, received the grant and then you publish something in open access and it appears to be hijacked publication or predatory publication. So it's not only reputation, but also some legal obstacles and problems that you may have afterwards. So what to do apart from think, check, submit, and a part of this knowledge that we were trying to equip you with today? Whitelist, so directory of open access journals, yes, to see and Open Access Scholarly Publishers Association to check whether the journal that you want to publish in is on the list. Then, of course, Web of Science, Scopus, to check, but these are, of course, well, normally these are recognized journals, highly ranked, and it is more difficult to be published there, particularly at the beginning of your career. But also, I mean, you can check whether your journal, the journal that you want to publish in, is on the list. There are also blacklists. However, you know, Bill's list is not updated anymore, and generally, this is a huge discussion, as we also mentioned. Sometimes it's not black and white. Sometimes there's a huge gray zone. There are dubious also publishers or dubious journals. So it's better maybe instead of searching blacklist, searching for good practices. And of course, the first contact should be your subject librarian, or academic librarian, and your supervisors, because you know your supervisor knows the field. So of course, she or he also knows the journals that are valuable in the domain. And subject librarians, or generally academic librarians in the 6 of our universities in 4EU Plus Alliance, are also very well oriented in open publishing, in open science. So they are also willing and ready to help you and support when you have a doubt about anything related to publishing in open access. Well, here are some further readings if you are interested in more crime stories and detective stories and investigations and how it happened and how it started with Hijacked and with Predators. We are leaving you with some further readings, which can be really interesting to see how people were also detecting those dubious publishers. And here also we would like to announce and promote another sessions from our service. There are 3 upcoming sessions in February and March, and 4 more in sunny spring and early summer. But on the website, there is a, well, complete list of all of them. So, well, we would like to thank you for listening. We are ready to take some questions. There are already many questions in the chat, so I think we should start from them. And then if you would like to ask some more, you know, verbally or in the chat, do not hesitate. So, well, let's start from the very beginning. Stanislav is asking about the Cambridge Scholars Publishing. If they charge no fee, as they wrote, what is their benefit? Well, they don't give you any rights. So they don't give you any rights, so you are not allowed to. So it is not more. It is, and they are just selling their books aggressively to many other countries, continents, and so, and you don't have anything from that. And it's nothing but a question of money, because normally we do not have money for publishing the books, but you don't have the rights to your work. So I would rather talk about the loss that we have than their benefit. And also this publisher, but again, I would like to say that it's more dubious than Predatory. They have no balance. You know, there is no. They disseminate very low quality and some good books as well. So it can be also the harm on the reputation of your research career assessment. So it's better to talk about our benefits or our loss than about benefit of the publishers, I think. Well, there was also the question how we would categorize fast-track publication for dollars. Georg, will you take that?
I'll try. Right. So in general, there are serious and established publishing houses who offer fast-track publications. And usually, it's yeah, for example, right now, COVID-19, if you have some breakthrough paper and it's highly cited on archive or bioarchive, mid-archive or something, and you can maybe apply for fast track publications. But still, of course, my main criterion is you have real peer review, you have hard peer review, and the criterion should not be that you pay extra money or too much extra money, but of course the criterion has to be, okay, that's something that's of tremendous public interest and should be plausible that everyone has to know it now, not in 6 months, which the usual, could be the usual time for review and for until you usually publish a paper. So just paying lots of money for fast track, as I had this example for this Saudi Journal of Medicine, for example, that's not the way to go. So not every fast track publication, again, it's not 100%, but not every fast track publication offer is dubious, but there should be some criteria should be met. Most importantly, quality control and the usual standards. I hope this is sufficient. I'm not sure, but
it depends on the field also, as you mentioned COVID and medical or physics at the beginning, but fast track publishing in history, in humanities, it could be suspicious. It could be suspicious, really. So it depends also on the field. There will be recording from today's meeting. The meeting is being recorded, so it will be available to you afterwards. Also, there is a question: is there any predatory journal became reliable, and any reliable became predatory? I'm not sure even if there are any studies on that, because normally those who are investigating hijacked or predatory publishers focus more on bad practices than on changing in politics. So I do not have that kind of knowledge, to be honest.
I'll say, that would be my judgment as well, I would say. Maybe I'll try the next one. Okay, you don't have to publish an article in scientific journal. That's not true for open access publishing, of course. So there you have to pay an APC. That's not, only if you go for some traditional journal where your library has to pay subscriptions for. How can I distinguish newborn paper, which really search for articles and predatory publishers? That's related to another question, I think.
Newborn publishers.
Yeah. So that's, of course, hard. If you have, for example, there's a new society founded last year and they have some new journal out and it's listed nowhere. So it's surely not in the Web of Science index or Science Citation Index, and it's listed nowhere else. Of course, that's problematic. Yeah, and especially these very young journals are hard to judge. And usually, what I would say is, if you're really in doubt, don't go for it, because these young journals are aware of the fact that they need to be listed in the whitelist. They go usually actively to the respective organizations I mentioned, for example, Directory of Open Access Journals, and try to get listed in them. So they have to make clear what is our policy, how our work flows, and if they are still not listed there, or it's just too early to be listed there, I would say in general don't go with them, even though it's not fair.
Well, Emanuela is. I will mute her. Yeah.
Okay, that would be my judgment. But of course, if you know really that this is a great society, it's new, and I try to add to their agenda, and the people, go for it, of course. But if you have no more information, I wouldn't risk it.
Sylvie is asking, would it be possible to have a white list of all the well-known publishers? but there are some, like, for example, Directory of Open Access Journals, but also some countries are trying to moderate it, like, for example, by publishing the list of recognized journals in the field, which is important afterwards to have the, when you have the research career assessment, for example. So, but I think it is connected with the, also with some question, with some comments or questions of same Sylvie, that researchers should share information about the good and bad publishers, and it would be possible to send alerts to the universities. Well, so for example, those readings that we left here on the slides, these are the nice descriptions of investigations. I mean, how the researchers were investigating whether some publishers are good and recognized, or whether they are where they are dubious, let's say like that. Some universities also, it depends, even within our audience, it depends on how is your repository built. Some of them are trying to control how many, if there are any publications that are dubious or published at predatory journals. So there are some movements. And some good practices that are aiming at selecting or evaluating the sources. Yes, Fatima is writing something that I think also someone, oh yeah, that Stanisław also coined here, that also the new about the new journals. Yeah, sure. I mean, some journals started and they were new, yeah, and there are some new journals that are being established, for example, for the new fields of sciences, or some interdisciplinary. But the most important is all those features that we were listed here, like a good editorial board, like code of ethics. These are very important things, like charges or not for publishing, what type of open access they apply, who they have in the editorial board, who is their editor, publisher. Yeah. So these are like the aspects that should be taken under consideration while applying to the new, let's say, relatively new journal. What questions we have then about the slides? Oh, MBPI. Yeah. Well, I think this is a question from Charles University, how it is perceived across 4 universities. Well, what about Heidelberg? It's hard to say. What about Warsaw?
I'm not sure actually. So half a year ago, I really had the impression. So because they are growing so fast, right? The problem is this. Yeah, they weren't around 5, 6, 7 years ago. It was extremely small. Now they are going through the roof, and they are publishing so much. Yeah, one of the absolute leading publishers right now, even contesting Springer, Elsevier, and something like that. So that's because that's so much on the agenda, I think. And actually, I don't want to give here some decisive judgment. I think it's mixed. Maybe it also depends on the field, and in some fields, people go for the journals and with a very good feeling, and maybe there is surely peer review to some degree, and there is quality control to some degree. But of course, it's it's a bit strange they are growing so fast. Yeah, of course they're cheaper than the established ones. It as we told, there's a big gray zone. I don't think they're criminals, surely not. But yeah, if I have but they're also not science or nature. That's definitely the case. Yeah, there's something between. From my gut feeling, I wouldn't classify them as predatory, but there are other people who do, and they have good reason to do so. And maybe it really depends also a bit on the subject. I think, yeah, that's what I would say. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's difficult, and I really would go for your subject librarian or your supervisor or head of your group or professor. What does he think? Is this really respectable publication or not? And maybe it really depends in this case a bit on the field as well.
I think it depends on the field also, and some of their practices are good and some of them are not. And you see here, yeah, my colleague is writing that in Warsaw, our library, the main library, started to take a closer look at them. Also, the colleague from Copenhagen wrote that no more, no more reviews. So I think I would categorize them as dubious so far, maybe, you know, as this big gray zone, as you said. So if you have another option, maybe go to another publisher, not to just to avoid any kind of problems or doubts in the future. Do we have anything else? No, I think we do not have more questions. Yeah, it's like a gray zone, this MBPI, I think. Well, so apparently no more questions from your part. So, okay, we will share the records soon on Zenodo, and we strongly invite you to take part in upcoming sessions. Choose all or choose those who are that are more interested to you. So, thank you very much for your attention, for your questions, for your involvement, and good luck with your research. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you very much for attending.